Great. That's a great question. I first started, in a broader context. I started on a health journey first, or a wellness journey. I wasn't thinking about my mind or my heart, but I was looking around and saying, okay, I'm being too sedentary, and eating too much junk food, and what are the alternatives? And it started me on this wellness journey that um, is part of what's in the new book. But so I focused on nutrition and saw talk about trauma in our food system. There's so much bad stuff in our food system that we're pretty much unaware of as consumers, but that's another story. And then I got into exercising, that part of it. But I probably experienced two major traumas that I'm aware of, and I started my healing journey by accident. And from that healing journey, once I got healed, and this is before I was even aware of plant medicines, I joke my dad was an organic chemist, and I wish he were alive today, because I would so love to have a discussion about psychedelics with him, because he was all about novel compounds. And but I joke because he was he considered himself the neighborhood narc. He would walk the neighborhood and come back home and say, "I smell marijuana in the neighborhood." And so I fell into that whole, you know, say no to drugs. Drugs are evil, and all that, part because my dad. But so that's why I think it's ironic that we have these beautiful substances now, and I would so love to pick his brain about it. But so my healing first started with nature, and that is probably my strongest healing modality. There are so many benefits to that. But and then about 3 years ago, a little more than that, my partner and I watched an episode, a podcast with Jesse Gould, who is the founder of Heroic Hearts Project, which is helping save veteran lives by taking them on plant medicine journeys in South America right now, and Mexico. And yeah, amazing. And I had never heard of ayahuasca. And yeah, of course I knew LSD and magic mushrooms and all that, but I'd never heard of ayahuasca, and that began this sort of deep dive into all these plant medicines, and even cannabis, which again, I had just the fundamental, stoner's perception part from my father. Uh, and cannabis has so many amazing medicinal properties as well, but all these plants do. And then I've been an educator my entire life. And so when I looked at the history and saw the lies, the misinformation, all the reasons why these plant medicines have been banned for 50 plus years, it just made my blood boil. Because how could this happen? How could we ban something that, most of these psychedelics are Schedule 1, and Schedule 1 drugs say they're highly addictive and have no medicinal value. And we know that all the true psychedelics, it's the complete opposite. They are anti-addictive, and they are extremely healing. And yes, we're now finally maybe going to see some changes in the next couple of years. But so that's how I got into this journey. Partly my passion for veterans, partly my uh, love of healing and wanting the world to heal, and partly my just outrage at a government, and not just the government, but big pharma and other interests just blocking our ability to heal, and probably causing millions of death. If you think of how, if we talk about that somewhere between 150 and 200 people commit suicide every day, you multiply that by 50 years. I haven't done the math. I think it'd be too heartbreaking, but think of how many millions of people lives could have been saved if we didn't have this war on drugs, and how many people that have been in jails, especially for cannabis, that
Mhm.
have ruined families because of politics.
Without a doubt. without a doubt. I mean, I just think of all of the communities and the families that were destroyed. And now with the opioid crisis and how drugs are being cut with fentanyl
Oh,
and these days, and it's just killing people daily at enormous rates. And the fact that plant medicine is an alternative that could save so, so, so many.
yeah. I love what's happening in Kentucky right now, which, you think, again, plant medicine should be apolitical. It shouldn't be one party or the not. And we are seeing some bipartisan across the aisles. But, you would think California, Oregon, Colorado, Washington would be, kind of the more
Mhm.
liberal states would be it. But Kentucky, they are on the cusp of maybe approving ibogaine for treatment of opioid addiction, because ibogaine is the one psychedelic that is so powerful at cutting addictions. People have one treatment with ibogaine and the addiction is gone. And so
Wow.
we could solve this addiction crisis today if ibogaine, and ibogaine's the one that does it the best, but other psychedelics do it as well. In fact, I don't know how well this story is known, but the founder of Alcoholics Anonymous actually used LSD to break his addiction to alcohol, and the LSD helped him create the 12-step program. So these psychedelics have that's what I mean by anti-addiction. It actually stops other addictions as well. So that's, if Kentucky goes on board, which again, a southern state, I would hope there's a domino that, West Virginia, which has also been so badly hurt by the opioid crisis, and other states in Pennsylvania, I think as well. It'd be wonderful to see these psychedelics again changing lives.
I agree. I mean, I live in Washington, and the drug issues here, and I live right on the border of Oregon near Portland. So I see so much homelessness, houselessness, I think they say now. And
Hmm.
and I see so much many people suffering from drug addiction um in this state, in both of the states, right in the Pacific Northwest,
Yep.
we'll just say. And I would think this would be a no-brainer, especially in in Oregon, if
Yeah.
most drugs are legal to a certain holding a certain amount,
Right.
which is was also unheard of
Yes.
anywhere, right? And it decriminalized a lot.
Yep.
Okay. But you would think this particular plant medicine would be at the forefront of what they would approve here, because if they could stop the addiction, then maybe it could help with the houselessness
Yep.
and it could solve a lot of problems and save so many lives. So I agree with you.
Yeah.
Um, so I want to ask you, um, how exactly does plant medicine help heal trauma?
Love the question. Wow. I'd say there are two things it does, two major things that it does that, and by the way, I'm not, I don't, for those that are doing talk therapy, I think that's a great tool. In fact, a lot of people, I think the future trend, one of the big trends we're going to see down the road is therapists using psychedelics as part of the therapeutic model,
Mhm.
because you can only get so far in talk therapy. And I have a friend who I guess has unlimited resources, because he jokes, "Oh, I control my therapy. I talk whatever I want to talk about." And I'm like, "Well, isn't the point of therapy to heal?" And he's like, "No, no, I just want to, pick my therapist's brain." So, therapy works if you are committed to it. Anyway, psychedelics. The two big things that psychedelics do is, one, they put you in what we call the observer mode. So you go into this what we call the journey, the psychedelic experience, and you see your trauma if you allow it. You also control it. You can say, we talk about, you have to surrender to the medicine. And if you don't surrender, you may not uh, see the trauma you experienced, and you may not get that healing. So you have to be dedicated to do that. But you see the trauma, but in a third person. People talk about like watching a movie and seeing the events happen and not having that emotional connection, that fight or flight mode, but just like, oh, this is interesting, and I see now, and it helps you re-experience that in a non-traumatic way, and it helps. The big thing with trauma is trauma. It's not the trauma that is causing the problems in our life. It's the unprocessed emotions tied to that trauma. It's it's those emotions. Why did that happen to me? Or if I had only just been 5 minutes faster or 5 minutes slower, or all these things we say to ourselves. But so it's these unprocessed emotions. So we get to experience this traumatic event, and it's I think it's most profound from the stories I've heard from military veterans or people or adults that had childhood abuse that can witness these horrendous things, but see it in a way that gives them closure. So that's part one of the psychedelics, and then the other part, and some people, maybe that's the non-scientific part in a way, but the scientific side of it is so mind-blowing, because we see from brain image studies that what psychedelics do is they turn down what we call the default mode network, which you can think of as your ego, the thing you always hear, the voice you always hear in your head. It turns that down and allows it turns on other parts of the brain. So parts of the brain you may have not even talked to since you were a child, or since had that traumatic experience 5 years ago, 10 years ago, whenever. It starts connecting these things, and we call this process neuroplasticity. So we used to think that our brain stopped developing in our 20s, and in fact then we started seeing kind of brain being stable and maybe slow decline as we got older and older. And the other amazing thing with psychedelics, again the true psychedelics especially, is that they increase brain neuroplasticity, which means we are actually making our brains better, more efficient, connecting parts we hadn't used in a long time. And the other amazing part is and this part I don't get yet, and I'm not a Harvard scientist or anything like that. But the other amazing thing they do is the psychedelics also find